My friends, today I bring you a message that has the power to shift your life in ways you never imagined. This is a word straight from the heart of God, and if you grasp it, it will transform your spiritual walk, your destiny, and your connection with the divine. Spiritual growth begins with inner focus. Many people spend their lives looking outward, measuring their progress by what others are doing, seeking validation from people, and trying to prove themselves in the eyes of the world. But true transformation, real lasting God-ordained change, starts within. It starts when we shift our attention away from the noise of the world and focus on what God is doing in us. God has placed something unique inside each of us, but if we are constantly looking around, comparing ourselves to others, or getting distracted by opinions, we lose sight of the work He is doing within us. There is a reason why in the Bible we are said to guard our hearts, for everything we do flows from it. The condition of our inner being shapes our actions, our thoughts, and our destiny. If we focus on external matters while neglecting the development of our spirit, we will always feel empty, restless, and disconnected from God's purpose. When Jesus walked on earth, He did not allow distractions to take Him away from His mission. He withdrew often to pray, to be alone with the Father, to ensure that His focus remained on what truly mattered. He was never in a rush to prove Himself to anyone. He did not seek approval from crowds. He knew that His power and purpose came from His relationship with the Father, not from the opinions of people. This is the mindset we must adopt. The world constantly pulls us in different directions, tempting us to look at others and wonder if we are behind, if we are good enough, if we measure up. But in the Bible, we are said to run our own race with perseverance, fixing our eyes not on people, but on the divine assignment set before us. When we focus on our own growth, we stop being anxious about other people's success. We begin to trust that God has a perfect plan tailored for us, and that plan cannot be rushed, altered, or diminished by human opinions. Many people struggle in their spiritual lives because they are too busy monitoring the actions of others rather than seeking their own transformation. But God is not asking us to fix other people. He is not asking us to control situations beyond our reach. He is asking us to be faithful in what He has given us. In the Bible, we are said to examine ourselves, to test our own faith, to make sure we are aligned with His will. That means our primary concern should not be what others think, do, or say. It should be our own spiritual growth, our own obedience, our own faithfulness. When we take our eyes off distractions and turn them inward toward God's refining work in us, we become unshakable. We begin to see doors open, not because we forced them, but because we were positioned for them. We begin to walk in divine peace, not because circumstances are perfect, but because our hearts are aligned with heaven. Silence is a spiritual weapon. In a world that constantly demands our attention, urges us to respond, and pressures us to explain ourselves, silence becomes a powerful act of faith. It is not an act of weakness, but of wisdom, a tool that allows God to move on our behalf without interference. The enemy thrives in noise, distractions, arguments, and endless explanations. But when we choose silence, we shift the battle into God's hands. There is a reason why in the Bible we are said to be slow to speak and quick to listen. Words carry power, and when used carelessly, they can create unnecessary battles, fuel conflicts, and even delay our breakthroughs. Many times people feel the need to defend themselves, to prove a point, or to respond to criticism, but silence often speaks louder than words. When Jesus stood before his accusers, he did not argue or try to justify himself. He remained silent because he understood that his purpose did not require human approval. His silence was not surrender. It was confidence in the will of the Father. When we stay silent in situations where the flesh wants to react, we demonstrate trust in God's ability to handle the situation. In the Bible, we are said to let the Lord fight our battles and to remain still. Stillness is not inactivity. It is a deliberate choice to step aside and allow divine intervention. The moment we stop fighting unnecessary battles with words, we create space for God to act. Many people prolong their struggles because they engage in debates that are meant to distract them from their true calling. The enemy wants us entangled in unnecessary conversations, responding to every insult, justifying every decision, and explaining ourselves to people who will never understand. But in the Bible, we are said not to cast our pearls before those who cannot appreciate them. There are moments when silence preserves our peace and keeps us aligned with God's plan. Not every battle requires our voice. Some victories come through stillness. When the Israelites stood before the Red Sea with the enemy behind them, fear could have led them to panic, to complain, or to strategize in their own strength. But in the Bible, we are said to be still and see the salvation of the Lord. Silence became their weapon. It positioned them to witness a miracle that no amount of words could have accomplished. God moves in silence. He speaks in the quiet places. The world shouts, but God whispers, and those who train themselves to embrace silence will hear his voice more clearly. They will discern his direction without confusion. They will walk in power without the need for constant explanation. There is a level of spiritual authority that comes when a person no longer feels the need to react to everything. They become unshakable, knowing that their silence is not empty. It is filled with divine strategy, protection, and the assurance that God is always in control. Avoiding distractions and comparisons is one of the greatest keys to spiritual growth. The world is filled with noise, constantly pulling people in different directions, making them question their progress and tempting them to look at the lives of others instead of focusing on their own journey. The moment a person starts comparing their life to someone else's, they lose sight of what God is doing in them. Distractions come in many forms: opinions, criticism, social pressure, and even the success of others. But none of these should determine the path God has set for an individual. In the Bible, we are said to run our race with perseverance, fixing our eyes on the assignment given to us. No runner in a race looks to the side to see how fast another is going. Doing so only slows them down. The same is true in life. When a person keeps checking on others, wondering why someone else seems to be advancing faster, they take their eyes off their own progress. What God has for one person is not meant for another, and the timing of one's blessing is not meant to match another's schedule. One of the biggest traps of the enemy is making people feel like they are behind He whispers lies that others are doing better, that their efforts are not enough, that they should be further along. But in the Bible, we are said to trust in the Lord with all our hearts and lean not on our own understanding. God's plan is beyond human logic. What may seem like a delay is often divine preparation. Comparing oneself to others leads to frustration, but focusing on one's own journey leads to transformation. Jesus never allowed distractions to take him away from his mission. Many times, people tried to pull him into debates, to test him, to get him to focus on things that did not align with his purpose. But he always responded with wisdom, never allowing himself to be moved by the opinions of others. He understood that his calling was unique, and no amount of comparison or distraction could change it. That same principle applies today. The moment a person begins to seek validation from people, they lose sight of their divine assignment. In the Bible, we are said to set our minds on things above, not on earthly things. Distractions are designed to keep people focused on temporary matters instead of eternal purpose. The moment a person shifts their attention to what truly matters, peace follows. They stop worrying about who is ahead, who is watching, or who is commenting on their journey. They begin to walk with confidence, knowing that their only competition is who they were yesterday. God's plan is personal. No two people have the same path, the same struggles, or the same breakthroughs. The only way to truly walk in divine purpose is to block out distractions, stop looking at others, and focus completely on the process God is leading them through. When a person masters this, they step into a life of fulfillment, peace, and supernatural progress. God speaks in stillness. In a world filled with noise, constant movement, and endless distractions, it becomes difficult to hear the voice of God. People often expect God to speak in loud, dramatic ways, but he often chooses to communicate in quiet moments. When life is filled with too many voices, confusion sets in. But when a person silences the world and becomes still before God, they begin to hear with clarity. In the Bible, we are said to be still and know that he is God. Stillness is not just about physical quietness. It is a posture of the heart, a state of surrender, where a person stops striving, stops overanalyzing, and simply listens. Many people pray, but few take the time to listen. They present their requests, voice their concerns, and pour out their frustrations, but they do not pause long enough to hear what God is saying in return. The reason many struggle with direction in life is not because God is silent. It is because they have not quieted themselves enough to recognize his voice. Elijah experienced this when he sought God on the mountain. There was a great wind, an earthquake, and a fire, but God was not in any of them. Then came a gentle whisper, and that is where God was. Many expect God to move through grand signs, but he often chooses the whisper. The problem is that whispers can only be heard in stillness. When a person is too busy, too distracted, or too focused on their own plans, they miss the voice of God. In the Bible, we are said to listen carefully to what the Spirit is saying. That means God is always speaking, but not everyone is listening. The enemy works by creating noise, distractions, fear, worry, and endless busyness, because he knows that if a person remains in a state of constant movement, they will not recognize when God is giving direction. But when they slow down, shut out the noise, and focus their hearts on him, revelation begins to flow. Jesus himself modeled the power of stillness. He often withdrew to quiet places to pray, away from the crowds, away from the demands of people. Even though he carried the most important mission in history, he never allowed busyness to replace his time with the Father. He understood that his strength, wisdom, and direction came from moments of stillness. If he, being the Son of God, needed those moments, how much more do we? In the Bible, we are said to seek and we will find, to knock and the door will be opened. But seeking requires focus. It requires a willingness to turn down the volume of the world and be fully present with God. Those who make stillness a priority will hear divine instruction, receive clarity for their lives, and walk in the peace that surpasses all understanding. Your breakthrough is in obedience. Many people seek answers, direction, and favor from God, but they overlook one of the most powerful principles in the spiritual realm: obedience. God moves in response to faith. But faith is not just believing, it is acting according to his instructions. Delayed obedience is still disobedience, and partial obedience is not obedience at all. The moment a person fully surrenders and follows what God has spoken, supernatural doors begin to open. In the Bible, we are said to obey his commands so that we may walk in his blessings. Obedience is not about following rules. It is about alignment with divine purpose. There are many people waiting for God to move, but God is waiting for them to take the next step. Every major breakthrough in Scripture happened when someone obeyed without hesitation. When God told Abraham to leave his homeland, he moved without questioning. When the widow was told to pour oil into empty jars, she obeyed, and the oil did not run out. When Peter was told to cast his net, after catching nothing all night, he obeyed, and his net overflowed with fish. The common thread in all these moments was obedience before understanding. Many struggle because they want full details before they act. They want God to explain the outcome before they step out in faith. But in the Bible, we are said to walk by faith, not by sight. That means obedience often comes before clarity. A person may not see how everything will work out, but if God has spoken, their job is to move. Some breakthroughs remain locked because people hesitate. They argue, delay, or try to negotiate with God, not realizing that delayed action can mean delayed blessing. Jesus himself was the ultimate example of obedience. Even when faced with the most difficult assignment, going to the cross, he said, "Not my will, but yours be done." That act of obedience led to the greatest victory in history. If Jesus, being the Son of God, had to submit in obedience, then every believer must understand that obedience is the key to unlocking their destiny. In the Bible, we are said that those who hear his words and put them into practice are like a wise man who built his house on the rock. That means it is not enough to know what God has said. Action must follow. Obedience positions a person for favor. When Naaman, a commander with leprosy, was told to wash in the Jordan River 7 times, he almost missed his miracle because the instructions seemed too simple. But the moment he obeyed, his skin was restored. Many people miss breakthroughs because they dismiss the simplicity of God's instructions. They expect something dramatic, but often God moves through simple acts of faith. In the Bible, we are said that if we are willing and obedient, we will eat the good of the land. That means provision, breakthrough, and divine acceleration are tied to a person's willingness to act on what God has spoken. Spiritual maturity requires discernment. Not every battle is meant to be fought, and not every situation requires a response. Many people exhaust themselves engaging in unnecessary conflicts, reacting to negativity, and trying to defend themselves in situations where God has called them to be still. Wisdom is knowing when to speak and when to remain silent, when to move and when to wait, when to engage and when to walk away. The enemy's strategy is often to pull people into distractions that drain their energy and shift their focus away from what truly matters. But those who walk in discernment understand that silence can be more powerful than words, and stillness can be more effective than striving. In the Bible, we are said to be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. That means wisdom is required in navigating relationships, handling opposition, and responding to criticism. Jesus himself was constantly challenged by religious leaders who sought to trap him with their words. Yet he never reacted emotionally or engaged in arguments that served no purpose. He answered with wisdom, and sometimes he remained silent because he knew that truth does not need to be constantly defended. Those who understand this principle do not waste time trying to prove themselves to people who are determined to misunderstand. There are moments when God instructs a person to stand still and let him fight the battle. In the Bible, we are said that vengeance belongs to the Lord. When a person truly believes this, they stop trying to take matters into their own hands. They no longer feel the need to respond to every insult, defend every accusation, or prove their worth to those who doubt them. They understand that God is their defender, and he sees what others do not. The greatest victories often come when a person chooses to step aside and allow God to move. Discernment also helps in recognizing divine timing. Many people rush ahead of God, forcing situations that are not yet ready, or they hesitate when he has already opened a door. In the Bible, we are said that there is a time for everything. That means not every opportunity is meant to be taken. Not every invitation is meant to be accepted, and not every situation requires immediate action. Those who move in discernment learn to recognize when God is calling them forward and when he is telling them to wait. Jesus never allowed urgency or pressure from others to dictate his actions. When news came that Lazarus was sick, he did not rush immediately. He waited because he knew the timing of the miracle was just as important as the miracle itself. Many people operate in fear of missing out, making decisions out of anxiety rather than wisdom. But in the Bible, we are said to trust in the Lord with all our heart and lean not on our own understanding. Discernment brings peace. It allows a person to walk in confidence, knowing that when God is in control, nothing is ever truly missed, delayed, or lost. Ladies and gentlemen, you may have been feeling like things have been shifting around you, doors closing, relationships changing, plans unraveling, but I came to tell you, this is not a setback. This is divine setup. There are signs God is sending that he is preparing great news for you. And if you tune your spirit, you'll see the supernatural unfolding right before your eyes. Sure, here's the expanded version of the first keynote, crafted in a way that fits the Sid Roth style, prophetic, passionate, and revelatory, with seamless integration of biblical truths. Sometimes what feels like delay is actually divine design. We look around and see others stepping into their blessings, walking into their breakthroughs, moving forward, and we wonder why we seem to be standing still. But in the Spirit, nothing is ever wasted. When God allows a pause, it is never without purpose. He's not ignoring you. He's preparing something that exceeds what you've prayed for. The time between the promise and the fulfillment often feels like silence, but in that silence, God is speaking in deeper ways. God's preparation doesn't always look like progress. In fact, it often looks like the opposite. There are seasons where things seem to fall apart, but spiritually, that's when things are falling into place. In the Bible, we are said that all things work together for good to those who love God. That includes the waiting, the confusion, the delays, and even the detours. God is not only orchestrating what's ahead of you, He's shaping you to be able to hold it. When Joseph was given a dream, he didn't step into the fulfillment the next day. Instead, he was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and locked in a prison. To the natural eye, it looked like God had forgotten him. But God was building something in the hidden place. Joseph was being trained in the shadows for what would soon be revealed in the light. And when the time came, the promotion happened suddenly, but it had been prepared over years of what looked like delay. The truth is, heaven's timing doesn't match earthly clocks. God operates from eternity. While we measure time in minutes, He measures it in purpose. That's why it can feel like things are being held back, when in reality, they're being held together until the right moment. In the Bible, we are said that there is a time and season for every purpose under heaven. That includes the season you're in right now. What if the very things that frustrate you are actually indicators that you're on the edge of something holy? What if the silence means God is speaking on your behalf in rooms you haven't entered yet? You're not being denied. You're being developed. God isn't punishing you with waiting. He's positioning you for release. In the Bible, we are said that though the vision tarries, wait for it, because it will surely come and will not delay. That's not just a promise, it's a prophecy over your timeline. There's a hidden grace in delay. God hides the fullness of His plans, not to keep them from you, but to prepare them for you and to prepare you for them. Just because you haven't seen it yet doesn't mean God isn't working. In fact, the more silent the season, the more sacred the preparation. There is a pattern in how God operates, and if you study the Word, you begin to see it repeat. Breakthrough doesn't come randomly. It follows a rhythm, a divine pattern that God has been using since the beginning. Before breakthrough, there's almost always a buildup, a stretching, a season that tests the heart, purifies the motives, and deepens the dependency on God. In the Bible, we are said that those who wait on the Lord will renew their strength. They will run and not grow weary, walk and not faint. That's not just encouragement, it's a revelation of divine order. Strength comes after waiting. Elevation follows humility. Glory rises after pressing. When you trace the lives of people God used powerfully, the pattern becomes clear. Before David was anointed king, he was tending sheep in obscurity. Before Esther stepped into the palace, she was hidden in preparation. Before Moses parted the sea, he spent years in the wilderness learning to hear the voice of God. The wilderness, the waiting, the warfare, is not just random suffering, it's divine training. God allows pressure to prepare the vessel. In the Bible, we are said that unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. That speaks of process, the death of self, the burial of pride, the breaking of comfort. It all precedes the birth. There is a spiritual law at work. What is birthed in the Spirit must first be labored in faith. Before there is a release in the natural, there is often a resistance in the invisible realm. That tension you feel, that pushback in your spirit, that's not always a sign of failure. Sometimes it's a divine indication that something is about to break through. In the Bible, we are said to fight the good fight of faith and lay hold of eternal life. That language tells us this is not passive. Breakthrough is often contended for before it is celebrated. The enemy doesn't attack what isn't threatening. The moment you start aligning with heaven's assignment for your life, you become a target, not because you're weak, but because you're dangerous to the kingdom of darkness. That's why right before the breakthrough, the pressure increases. The lies get louder, the attacks feel more personal. But this too fits the pattern. Even Jesus, before stepping into his public ministry, was led into the wilderness to be tested. But he came out in the power of the Spirit. There is power waiting on the other side of pressure. God reveals breakthrough through repetition in Scripture because he wants his people to recognize the signs when they appear in their own lives. The discomfort, the shaking, the shifting, it's not to break you, it's to birth something in you. And when the pattern unfolds, when the testing precedes the triumph, it's a signal that heaven is preparing something beyond what the eye can see. Sometimes we look for God in the obvious, but he often speaks through signs that require spiritual discernment. When great news is near, heaven doesn't always announce it with thunder or trumpet blast. It begins with whispers in your spirit, interruptions in your routine, shifts in your atmosphere. There are signs that something is coming, and for those who walk closely with God, these signs become confirmation that breakthrough is at the door. In the Bible, we are said that God does nothing without revealing it to his servants, the prophets. That means he gives glimpses, previews, and signs to those who are watching and listening. When something in your life suddenly begins to feel unsettled, when you can no longer be comfortable in old patterns or relationships, that is not just emotional, it is spiritual. God begins to stir your spirit before he shifts your season. The discomfort is not a problem, it's a signal. In the Bible, we are said that the Spirit will guide us into all truth. That guidance often begins with subtle movements in your heart that don't make sense to your mind. You feel a stirring to leave a place, to reach out to someone, to revisit an old promise you had buried. These aren't coincidences, they're signs. God uses what is natural to point to what is supernatural. You'll notice people coming into your life out of nowhere with words that confirm what you've been sensing in your secret place. A sermon, a song, a dream will speak directly to something you haven't even voiced aloud. That alignment isn't random, it's prophetic. Heaven is orchestrating a symphony of signs around you. In the Bible, we are said that God will pour out his Spirit, and sons and daughters will prophesy. Old men will dream dreams, and young men will see visions. These are not rare occurrences for the deeply spiritual. They are signs available to those who are in tune with God's timing. You might start to see the same number repeatedly, the same name, the same scripture rising up from different sources. Your spirit catches patterns that your flesh overlooks. The more spiritually alert you become, the more you begin to see heaven's fingerprints on what once looked like chaos. Even delays begin to look like divine timing. Even closed doors begin to feel like protection. The key is sensitivity. In the Bible, we are said that deep calls unto deep. Your spirit recognizes the voice of the one who made you, even when he speaks through signs rather than words. Before the breakthrough shows up in your hands, it first shows up in your atmosphere. There's a sense of divine anticipation. You may not be able to explain it, but you can feel it. The enemy will often try to distract you in these moments, using confusion or discouragement to get your eyes off what God is doing. But the spiritually mature will recognize the signs and hold their ground. They will discern that what they feel is not just emotion, it's evidence that God is on the move. Spiritual warfare often takes on a different form than we expect. We tend to think of it as battles in the physical realm, but most often it begins in the unseen. Just before a major breakthrough is often a pushback from the enemy. The enemy doesn't fight you because you're weak. He fights you because you are about to step into a divine destiny that will shake the kingdom of darkness. The resistance is a sign that something significant is on its way. In the Bible, we are said that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. The moment you begin to align with God's purpose, there will be spiritual resistance, not because you're failing, but because you're about to overcome. What seems like opposition is often divine confirmation. When the enemy resists, he's not just trying to slow you down. He's trying to keep you from realizing the fullness of what God has for you. Think about the Israelites on the brink of their promised land. They faced giants in the land, but those giants were not there to defeat them. They were there to be defeated by them. The opposition was a divine setup for victory. In the Bible, we are said that no weapon formed against us will prosper. And that promise doesn't mean there won't be weapons. It just means they won't succeed. When you feel like you're encountering resistance in your mind, your body, or your relationships, it's not a sign to retreat. It's a sign to press forward. Every time the enemy sends resistance, it's a hint that God is preparing you to rise higher. In the Bible, we are said that the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but Jesus came to give life, and life more abundantly. The presence of resistance is the very confirmation of the abundance coming your way. The enemy knows that the closer you get to your promise, the stronger your influence becomes. He wants to distract, discourage, and disrupt your focus because he's afraid of your destiny. Spiritual warfare comes in many forms. It can look like emotional attacks, mental confusion, physical exhaustion, or relational strife. It's not always obvious, but it's always strategic. The enemy knows that when you're about to step into your breakthrough, your faith needs to be anchored. That's why his tactics intensify. The good news is that the battle has already been won. In the Bible, we are said that we are more than conquerors through Christ who loved us. That means no matter how intense the battle may feel, you have already been positioned to win. Don't mistake spiritual warfare as a sign of defeat. It's the final push before the prize. It's often in the moment of greatest resistance that God shows himself strongest. The story of Job is a perfect example. Job faced devastating loss, personal betrayal, and physical illness. Yet, in the midst of his darkest trial, God was preparing him for double restoration. What looked like warfare was actually a door to God's greater blessing. Every battle you face, every resistance, every attack is a sign that God is getting you ready for a great release. The enemy doesn't fight what isn't a threat. Keep your eyes on the prize and stand firm in the victory God has already won for you. The breakthrough is on its way. In the spiritual realm, God often communicates through dreams, visions. These aren't just random thoughts or fleeting ideas. They are powerful signs that God is aligning things in the spirit realm before they manifest in the natural. God speaks to those who are sensitive enough to listen, and often the very dreams that seem abstract or unclear are actually heavenly messages that need to be deciphered. In the Bible, we are said that in the last days, God will pour out his Spirit on all people. And your sons and daughters will prophesy, your old men will dream dreams, and your young men will see visions. These are not just isolated events. They are part of God's plan to communicate his will, to reveal his purposes, and to prepare his people for what's coming. When God speaks in dreams, It's not always in a clear and direct manner. Sometimes he uses symbolism, metaphors, or imagery that requires discernment and revelation. Joseph, for instance, had dreams that didn't make sense at first. He saw himself and his brothers in a field binding sheaves of grain, and his sheaf rose up while the others bowed down. The dream wasn't immediately understood, but it was a divine indicator of God's purpose for his life. In the Bible, we are said that Joseph's dreams were prophetic, not just to comfort him, but to set him on a path that would lead him to a place of influence, authority, and divine favor. God was speaking to Joseph long before he saw the fulfillment of his dreams. When God begins to reveal things to you in your dreams or through visions, it's a sign that he's preparing you for a greater assignment. He is showing you glimpses of what's ahead, giving you insight into what is coming. It's not always easy to understand, but if you remain in a posture of prayer and expectancy, he will guide you. In the Bible, we are said that the Holy Spirit will lead us into all truth. If you find yourself waking up from a dream or a vision with a deep sense that something important has been communicated to you, take it seriously. It may not all make sense immediately, but the Holy Spirit will begin to reveal the meaning over time. There are times when dreams and visions come as warnings, telling you to prepare for something ahead. But there are other times when they come as confirmation, telling you that the steps you've been taking are aligned with God's will. It's as if heaven is signaling, keep going, you're on the right path. You're getting closer to the breakthrough. In the Bible, we are said that God is faithful to complete the work he begins in us. The dreams and visions he gives are often not just for the present moment. They are a preview of the future, showing you where he is taking you and what you are becoming. When you begin to notice patterns in your dreams, in your thoughts, or in the impressions that come to you, recognize that God is speaking through those subtle nudges. Sometimes these impressions are so quiet, but if you tune your spirit, they become clear indicators that God is setting things up for something extraordinary. Keep your heart open to the ways God speaks and watch for the signs in your dreams and visions, because God is preparing great things for you, and he's showing you glimpses of them through the language of the Spirit. God's hand is often moving in ways we don't immediately recognize. There are times when we feel like things are out of control, like life is spiraling into chaos, but in reality, God is working behind the scenes, quietly orchestrating events to bring about his purpose. What may look like confusion or disorder to the human eye is actually God's way of aligning things for the breakthrough you've been waiting for. In the Bible, we are said that God works all things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. It's in these moments of apparent chaos that God is positioning everything for a divine breakthrough, preparing you to step into something greater. When God is about to release something significant in your life, he often starts by shaking things up. Relationships, jobs, and even physical circumstances can suddenly feel unstable, and it can seem like everything is falling apart. But what we must understand is that God is not taken by surprise. The sudden shifts and changes are part of his plan to position you in the right place at the right time. In the Bible, we are said that everything has a season and a time for every matter under heaven. God is a master of timing, and even when things feel out of place, he is aligning everything in preparation for his promises to be fulfilled. You may find yourself in situations that don't seem to make sense, or in environments that seem hostile or unfruitful. This is when God is often working behind the scenes, preparing you for something greater. What looks like a setback is often a setup for something bigger than you can imagine. In the Bible, we are said that God will make a way where there seems to be no way. There are times when you feel like the doors are closed, but in reality, God is simply waiting for the right moment to open them. And sometimes He allows things to feel closed for a season, so that you will trust Him more deeply and rely on His timing. God's sovereignty is at work even when you don't see it. While your circumstances may seem chaotic, God is aligning people, situations, and events in the background to bring you exactly where you need to be. This is why it's important to hold on to faith, even when things don't look like they're going according to plan. In the Bible, we are said that the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and He delights in their way. Even when it feels like you're wandering or facing confusion, trust that God is ordering your steps, even in the wilderness. He knows exactly where He's taking you, even when you can't see the destination yet. In these times of apparent chaos, keep your eyes on God. He is not a God of disorder. What you see as confusion, He sees as the perfect moment for divine intervention. He knows the plans He has for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a future and a hope. What looks like chaos is really God's process of transformation, a preparation for the great things He is about to release into your life. One of the greatest revelations we can have as believers is that God is a God of seasons. He doesn't move according to our calendar or our sense of timing. When we think things should happen, God may be preparing us for something that requires more patience, more preparation, and more refinement. When it feels like nothing is happening, or when you feel like you're waiting endlessly, remember that God is not idle. In the Bible, we are said that to everything there is a season, a time for every matter under heaven. The waiting seasons are not empty. They are vital for your growth and readiness. Waiting can feel like one of the most challenging experiences. We live in a world that expects instant results, and when things don't happen quickly, we begin to doubt. But God works in ways that are beyond our understanding, and His perfect timing is always at work behind the scenes. The wilderness seasons, the times when you feel you are stuck, unseen, or overlooked are not wasted. God is preparing you for the blessing that is coming. In the Bible, we are said that the Lord is near to those who wait for Him, to the soul who seeks Him. It's in these seasons of waiting that God draws us closer to Him, teaching us to trust in His timing and His process. During these waiting seasons, God often works in ways that may not seem directly connected to the desires we have in our hearts. You may be praying for a breakthrough in one area of your life, but in this season, God might be refining your character, building your faith, or teaching you how to be patient. The preparation is not always visible, but it is always necessary. In the Bible, we are said that faith without works is dead. The waiting is part of the work. You may not see the results yet, but the process is creating something in you that is vital for the next step in your journey. As you wait, remember that God is never early, but He is never late. His timing is always perfect. His seasons are intentional. And even in the quiet moments when it feels like nothing is changing, He is working behind the scenes. You might not feel the shift happening, but like a seed planted in the soil, growth is happening beneath the surface. In the Bible, we are said that unless a seed falls to the ground and dies, it cannot bear fruit. The waiting is a season of dying to self, to impatience, to the pressure of wanting things on our terms. But when you allow God to have His way, you will see the fruits of that waiting season unfold in ways you never imagined. God does not waste time. He does not waste anything. Even the quiet moments of waiting are part of his divine plan. In the Bible, we are said that we can trust in the Lord with all our heart and lean not on our own understanding. The waiting is not about doing nothing. It's about doing everything in his strength, trusting his process, and knowing that he will bring you into the fullness of what he has prepared for you. There is a promise waiting for you, a breakthrough that is coming at just the right time, and you will be fully prepared to step into it when the season shifts. When you begin to step into the divine breakthroughs that God is preparing for you, you will notice that there is a new level of favor, and favor often manifests in unexpected ways. This favor isn't based on your efforts, your connections, or your own abilities. It's the overflow of God's goodness towards you, and it opens doors that you could never open on your own. God's favor is a divine gift, and when it starts to manifest, it's a clear sign that something great is about to unfold. In the Bible, we are said that God's favor surrounds the righteous like a shield. It's a protective, guiding force that not only blesses you, but also gives you favor with people who can help you fulfill your destiny. When God begins to open doors of favor, it can often come in the form of unexpected opportunities, divine connections, or even favor with people who might not even fully understand why they are drawn to help you. Favor doesn't always make sense from a human perspective. It's not based on your qualifications or status, but rather on God's sovereign will to bless and elevate his people. Just look at the life of Joseph. His journey from the pit to the palace wasn't by his own merit, but by God's divine favor. It was favor that caused him to find grace in the eyes of Potiphar, and favor that caused him to interpret Pharaoh's dream, ultimately leading to his elevation to a position of authority. In the Bible, we are said that promotion comes not from the east or west, but from the Lord. Favor is the key to that promotion. This divine favor doesn't just show up in the obvious ways. It can also manifest as unusual blessings, encounters, and provisions that come when you least expect them. Sometimes the favor of God will show up in situations where you thought all was lost, or in circumstances that seemed hopeless. God's favor has the power to shift your entire reality, and it will often catch you by surprise. The favor of God is not just about getting things. It's about positioning you for something bigger than you could ever achieve by your own strength. In the Bible, we are said that God is able to do immeasurably more than we ask or imagine, according to his power at work within us. This is the type of favor that aligns your life with God's greater purpose. One of the signs that God is preparing something great for you is that favor begins to surround you. You start to notice that doors open that were previously closed, relationships that were distant begin to grow closer, and opportunities arise that you had not anticipated. This favor is a sign that you are stepping into the season of your breakthrough. In the Bible, we are said that the blessings of the Lord make rich and add no sorrow. This kind of favor will elevate you without bringing regret or burden. It's not just about getting what you want. It's about stepping into God's will, where his favor makes everything work together for good. As God begins to release favor over your life, be ready for your environment to change. People may start to treat you differently, and situations that once seemed impossible will begin to align. This favor is not for selfish gain, but to propel you into your destiny and to accomplish the great things God has set before you. Recognize that favor is a clear sign that your breakthrough is on the horizon, and God is setting everything up for his glory to be revealed in your life. As you begin to step into the greatness God has prepared for you, there will come a time when you will feel an overwhelming sense of peace in the midst of uncertainty. This peace isn't the absence of problems or challenges, but a deep assurance that God is in control, working everything out for your good. It's the kind of peace that guards your heart and mind, even when everything around you feels chaotic. In the Bible, we are said that the peace of God surpasses all understanding and will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. This peace is a sign that you are aligning with God's will and that the breakthrough you've been waiting for is near. When this peace settles over you, it's not because everything is perfect, but because God is present in the situation, bringing order to what seems chaotic. You may not see the full picture yet, but the peace that comes from knowing that God is with you provides the strength to move forward with confidence. This peace is a supernatural gift from God that reassures you that despite the circumstances, you are secure in His hands. In the Bible, we are said that the Lord will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are stayed on Him. This peace is the fruit of trust and surrender, a declaration that you know God's plans for you are good, even when you cannot see the way forward. This peace doesn't just come in the good times. It often appears during the most challenging moments. It's when you are faced with uncertainty, adversity, or even personal loss that the peace of God becomes most evident. It is a peace that anchors you in God's promises, reminding you that He is your refuge and your strength, a very present help in times of trouble. In the Bible, we are said that God will never leave us or forsake us. The peace He gives doesn't depend on external circumstances, but on the inner assurance that God's presence is with you in every season. As you embrace this peace, you will notice that your anxiety, fear, and stress begin to diminish. You might not have all the answers, but you will have a quiet confidence that God's plans are unfolding according to His perfect timing. This peace is the evidence that God is preparing something great for you because He is the God of peace. And where His peace resides, His will is being accomplished. In the Bible, we are said that God is not a God of confusion, but of peace. The calmness that overtakes your spirit is a sign that God is orchestrating everything for your good, aligning everything to fulfill His purpose in your life. This peace also equips you to walk with faith in the unknown. The road to breakthrough is often filled with uncertainties and challenges, but peace allows you to walk in trust, knowing that God will never lead you where He cannot sustain you. It's in the peace that we find the strength to continue, to persevere, and to keep our eyes focused on the promise ahead. The peace of God doesn't just comfort, it empowers you to face what lies ahead with courage, knowing that God's hand is upon you. In this peace, you can rest assured that everything is moving according to God's divine plan. And it is in this peace that you can fully embrace the breakthroughs He is preparing for you. Trust in His peace, for it is the final confirmation that your breakthrough is near and the Lord is with you every step of the way.